Did you know there was actually supposed to be a fourth Spider-Man movie directed once again by Sam Raimi, starring Tobey Maguire? But due to many different factors, the film got cancelled and we almost never saw this version of Spider-Man again. I think I speak for many superhero fans when I say that my first introduction to comic book characters on the big screen was the first Spider-Man movie. I was actually obsessed with it, and I made my poor mom watch it with me over and over again. At the time, I had no idea how important this movie would be, not only for the entire genre, but the film industry as a whole. Before we get into the details of Spider-Man 4, let's take a step back to see how these movies came to be in the first place. Like, how did this guy, who was best known for his cheap and over-the-top horror movie, Evil Dead, manage to land in the director's seat for one of the most popular superheroes in the world? Well, when Sony was looking to make a Spider-Man film, they had a long list of directors they were eyeing, like Steven Spielberg, David Fincher, Chris Columbus, and many more. Sony actually told Sam Raimi straight up that there's about 18 directors we'd rather have than you, to which Sam replied, okay, well, I'm number 19. Which is such a Peter Parker thing to say, honestly. Once he got in the room with the executives, he explained how he was actually a huge comic book fan. In a later posted Reddit AMA, he said, quote, I directed the first Spider-Man film because I was such a huge fan of Stan Lee's brilliant character. Peter Parker and Spider-Man were an important part of my teenage years. I thought it was very moving how much he sacrificed for others, how hard he worked to protect innocent people, and all the while had to take care of his Aunt May and do his homework to boot. His self-sacrifice resonated with me. He was truly a good person. We can identify with characters in a comprehensible story, stories of heroes like Peter Parker, which remind us what we are capable of. Maybe you're one of those people that like to be reminded of the good you are capable of. Now, go out there and do something about it. How can you not love this man? Sony knew that someone like this, a guy who truly cared and was knowledgeable about the character, was the right person for the job. So they took a risk and hired him. Spider-Man 1 was a huge success, making over $820 million. Spider-Man 2 followed this up with an even better movie, making $794 million. But the good times couldn't last forever. The downfall of Spider-Man 4 actually started with Spider-Man 3. After the huge success of Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi was already spinning his webs on Spider-Man 3. His idea was going to focus on Spider-Man versus the Vulture or Spider-Man versus the Sandman. And that's it. No Harry Osborn, no Venom. It was actually the studio who thought Venom had huge potential for marketing and merchandise sales that forced Sam into including Venom into the film. Sam tried to push back, explaining that he didn't really understand Venom and didn't feel like he could do the best job with the character. Unfortunately, the studio insisted and kept trying to take creative control. Raimi backed down and now had to fit Venom into the story as well. But then, at the last minute, Sony decided that they needed a Harry Osborn redemption story, and it had to be this movie. So now, Sam Raimi had to jam 3 villains into a 2-hour and 19-minute movie. Unless you're a time traveler coming from the past, we all know that this didn't work out well. The movie was released to mixed reception, but honestly, it was a commercial success, making over $894 million. Sony was disappointed with the reception, but happy because of the commercial success. Sam Raimi, on the other hand, really took this failure to heart. To this day, he still feels upset about it.
Just a movie that didn't work very well. You know, had a lot of, I tried to make it work, but didn't really believe in all the characters, and so that can't be hidden from people who love Spider-Man. If a director doesn't love something, it's wrong of them to make it.
The low reviews for Spider-Man 3 had really upset Sony, and they were already starting to think of a reboot, which is so crazy to think about how the industry used to be. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania got a 46% on Rotten Tomatoes, but no one would ever dream of rebooting the MCU because of that. Despite the negative press, Sony decided to move forward with Spider-Man 4, and this time, Sam Raimi was going to fight hard for creative control. Alright, so what was this movie actually supposed to look like? Because no script was ever decided on, we only have some interviews and concept art to guess what exactly this film would have been. For the main villain, Raimi dug in his heels and said that this time, it's going to be the Vulture. And although at one point, he considered adding in the Lizard, but this was scrapped early on. Sam envisioned that the entire core cast reprised their roles, with Tobey and Kirsten maintaining the leads. The Lizard was going to be played by Dylan Baker, who we had already seen in 2 movies as Kirk Connors. The Vulture would have been played by John Malkovich, and apparently was going to have a very different origin from his comic counterpart. James Vanderbilt, who had just seen huge success with writing The Zodiac, was hired by Sony to write the script not only for Spider-Man 4, but also Spider-Man 5 and 6. keep this in mind because it will become very important later. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Here was the plot of Spider-Man 4. The movie started with a montage of Spider-Man catching some of his classic villains that Sam Raimi thought could never be the main antagonist of their own movies. This includes the Shocker, Prowler, Rhino, and even Mysterio. Mysterio would have been played by recurring cameo actor Bruce Campbell, which makes this line in Spider-Man 3 so much better.
It helps maintain the illusion.
Now, the main villain was confirmed to be Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture. This time, the Vulture would have been an ex-government assassin who got the name Vulture because of his brutality, leaving nothing behind but bones. He also would have a daughter, but this time it would be Felicia Hardy, aka the Black Cat, who would have been played by Anne Hathaway. The Vulture, who would be living in New York City, would buy the Daily Bugle and actually become Peter Parker's new boss. This version of the Vulture would look similar to the one we got in Spider-Man Homecoming, with the whole mechanical wings. The similarities stop there. In the concept art, we see a battle between Spider-Man and the Vulture, and he appears to be psychotic, enjoying attacking Spidey and killing innocent civilians. His wings are razor sharp and even cut through a gargoyle that Spidey has to jump over. Spider-Man then uses these gargoyles to his advantage in an aerial battle, which would have been amazing to see. During this battle, the Vulture uses a spinning attack that shoots out metal feathers which cut up Peter's suit. And it actually looks like Peter loses this battle, but unfortunately, that's really all we know. Sam Raimi came out and said that it would have ended with Spider-Man and Black Cat teaming up, with Vulture dying midair in the final battle. The other super interesting detail we can gather from the concept art is the costume concepts. We see a more homemade, realistic type of suit, with it even having faded colors because it's been washed so many times. And after some battle with common criminals, his suit is a patch job because he can't keep affording to replace the costume. I love this, and I think it could have been a really interesting plot line, as Peter's struggles are just as interesting to me as Spider-Man's. We also get some Peter Parker kissing scenes, but it's hard to tell if that's supposed to be MJ, Black Cat, or even Gwen Stacy. And unfortunately, that's all we know. This project has been kept under wraps very tightly, and we're pretty lucky to even know this much about it. All in all, it sounds like a fantastic Spider-Man movie, so what happened? There are a number of things that led to the cancellation of this movie, but I want to start with some of the lesser known ones. The first being that this movie was going to be expensive. At the time of its release, Spider-Man 3 was one of the most expensive movies ever made, and Sony was looking to cut costs. Rumors stated that Bryce Dallas Howard was introduced as Gwen Stacy to be a potential partner replacement for Peter Parker after Kirsten Dunst was paid $10 million for Spider-Man 3. Sam Raimi actually stepped in and said he couldn't imagine making the film without her, which might have led to some conflict behind the scenes. Then, Sony announced that Spider-Man 4 would be released May 6, 2011, 4 years after Spider-Man 3. This deadline wasn't working for Sam, as he had already gone through 4 revisions of the script and still hated it. At this point in his life, Sam Raimi had been working on Spider-Man for over a decade, and Sony's talks of a reboot were starting to wear him down. The script was going nowhere, the studio's interference was driving him crazy, and he couldn't hit the deadline that Sony had already announced. He truly wanted to do right by the fans and create the best Spider-Man movie he could, but sometimes it just doesn't work out. Before production started, he went to Sony and said, quote, "I don't want to make a movie that is less than great, so I think we shouldn't make this picture. Go ahead with your reboot, which you've been planning anyways," unquote. And then Sony co-chairman Amy Pascal said, quote, "Thank you. Thank you for not wasting the studio's money, and I appreciate your candor," unquote. Then, on January 11th, 2010, Sony announced that Spider-Man 4 had been canceled, and then just a few hours later, they announced The Amazing Spider-Man, which somehow already had a script written by James, the man who was supposed to be writing the script for Spider-Man 4. It seems like Sony had asked James to start working on a script for The Amazing Spider-Man behind Sam Raimi's back, but we'll never know exactly how that went down. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. Yes, even that one. But I really wish that we got to see this movie made instead. You can tell that Sam Raimi had so much passion for the character and franchise that this would have been really special. With all that being said, I think it's good that he left the table with no bad blood. Now that we've seen Tobey reprise his role as Spider-Man in No Way Home, and Sam Raimi's working on superhero films again, there's a small chance that maybe we might get a final conclusion to that superhero franchise that made our childhoods. Now I know that the internet is a divisive place, so I want to hear your thoughts. Do you wish that this movie got made, or are you happy with the way things turned out? If this got made, this scene might not have been possible. It's a weird butterfly effect to think about. Let me know in the comments, and please, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for even more movie content. Thank you so much for watching, internet.